And this is part two, Bohemia and Deplorable Bohemianism. In a backward glance, Wharton concludes that Herman Melville, who was qualified by birth to figure in the best society, and whose work she came to admire, was excluded from her parents' library on the grounds of his deplorable bohemianism, a reputation which also accounted for the banishment of the books of Edgar Allan Poe. By the late 19th century, thanks to Edward Murgett's Scenes of Bohemian Life, Victor Hugo's Les Miserables, Baudelaire's Flaneur, Wilde's French Salome, and George de Maurier's enormously popular 1895 novel Trilly. I didn't know that was popular. The word bohemian conveyed an image of the world in which poor artists, vegetarians, lotus eaters, and the inhabitants of the demi-monde intermingle and defy convention. It was a world made vivid by the life story of Rimbaud, whose wanderings took him from Paris to London and North Africa, places that also attracted Wharton. Although Rimbaud went to very different districts from the ones she frequented, she was familiar with his work and life and with the dual character of Bohemia itself. On the one hand, the word conjured up images of urban squalor, drugs, violence, and decadence, which Wharton, having grown up in an environment hostile to Bohemia, as the comments about Melville and Poe showed, would have found unsavory and unwelcome. On the other hand, in the late Victorian and Edwardian period in England, Bohemia was a playful, somewhat fashionable concept treated lightly. For example, by Kenneth Grahame in A Bohemian in Exile. The essay celebrates a picture of rural gypsy wandering, and Wharton, a great wanderer herself, could comfortably identify with. It need not signify anything too radical. Wharton was nevertheless uneasy about the contemporary flirtation with Bohemianism. It would be an exaggeration to say that the subject became her preoccupation, but the reef explores the consequences when Bohemia confronts Old World society. Her uneasy fascination with the subjects is unsurprising. With James, she shared an admiration for the writing of George Sand, and Sand's early lifestyle, like George Eliot's, challenged Wharton's old New York assumptions about correct behavior and female virtue. Uh, Wharton confronts the issue when she goes to visit Sand's house at Nohant, a visit that made James so envious. He persuaded her to make a second motor flight through France the following year, this time with James in tow. In her memoir of this trip, Wharton makes clear her view of the free unions and other irregularities that went on in the house when Sand lived there during the 1830s by referring to, quote, the two intimate servants in that household which called to mind Wildfell Hall, unquote. And Bronte's novel is more a nightmare of drinking and violence than it is an orgy of sexual license, although there are indeed illicit liaisons. But Wharton consoles herself with the thought that the French house itself had a reformed influence on the bohemian behavior practiced there, unlike its fictional counterpart. And here's a quote. And so one may not too fancifully recognize in it the image of those grave ideals to which George Sand gradually conformed the passionate experiment of her life, may even indulge oneself by imagining that an old house so marked in its very plainness, its conformity, must have exerted over a mind as sensitive as hers an unperceived but persistent influence, giving her that centralizing weight of association and habit which is too often lacking in modern character. The contrasting influence of Old House and Bohemia is a feature of two later novels by Wharton. Vance Weston, the writer whose life forms the subject of her post-World War novel sequence, Hudson River Bracketed and The Gods Arrive, comes into close contact with Bohemia in New York, Paris, and London. And Bohemian artists are seen to be shallow, and, like Weston at his worst, self-absorbed and unable to complete their work. Only a good woman can rescue them. Halo Tarrant, Vance's muse in the first novel, settles for being his mother figure in the second. She sees through the shallowness of Bohemia and knows that what both she and Vance really value is structure, tradition, and a good house. At the close of the second novel, Halo is expecting his child. The Willows in these later novels assumes an almost mythical quality reminiscent of Howard's End and provides the recuperative environment that Givre, the chateau in the reef, signally fails to supply. Dale M. Bauer has discussed the reef's concerns with Bohemia in the context of politics and class. According to Bauer, Dower errs by having sex with someone from the servant class. At the same time, Bohemianism represents the anarchy of free love politics. Bauer notes Darrow's familiarity with ladies and with women who were not ladies, and his avoidance of the Bohemian class, that intermediate society which attempts to consolidate both theories of life. So let's push this down just a bit. Darrow here seems to speak for the author, who applauds the sincerity and clarity of a world in which women are either irreproachable or sexually available, and there is no confusion between the two. It is the unsettling ambiguity of bohemianism that is marked out for disapproval. We glimpse the world of English Bohemia in London at the house of Mrs. Murrett, and of American Bohemia in France in the accounts of Farlow's, whose name suggests the depths to which they are prepared to sink, and for whom Wharton reserves a paragraph of her typically crushing satire. Darrow learns about them from Sophie. And I think I'm going to pause here.